December 26, 1944, Bastogne, Belgium, morning fog. General Heinrich von Leutwitz stood in the turret of his command half-track 3 kilometers south of Bastogne, watching smoke rise from the encircled town. The snow had stopped falling during the night, leaving a white silence broken only by distant artillery. He could see American positions through his field glasses, hastily dug foxholes, disabled vehicles, makeshift barriers constructed from fence posts, and furniture dragged from shattered homes. His forces had cut every road into the town 5 days ago. The 2nd Panzer Division had severed the northern supply lines. The Panzer Layer Division controlled the east. Von Leutwitz knew the mathematics of siege warfare. An encircled force of 10,000 men consumed roughly 40 tons of ammunition and food daily. The Americans had no supply route. They had no ammunition dumps within 50 kilometers. They had no fuel reserves to speak of. By German calculations based on Wehrmacht logistics doctrine and experience from Stalingrad, Bastogne should have surrendered 3 days ago. Von Leutwitz had even sent a formal demand for capitulation under flag of truce. The American commander's response, a single typed word, nuts. Now, had struck him as bravado masking desperation. He expected hunger to accomplish what his panzers could not. He expected the Americans to break as the French had broken, as the Poles had broken, as every army breaks when the supplies run dry. What General von Leutwitz did not know, what no German commander in the Ardennes could comprehend on that frozen December morning, was that the United States had already mobilized a logistical apparatus that existed beyond the scope of European military imagination. While his men shivered in their positions, rationing black bread and horse meat, the American supply machine was awakening. At Reims, 300 kilometers to the rear, Lieutenant General John C. H. Lee commanded COMS, the communication zone, a logistical empire employing 400,000 men whose sole purpose was to move materials forward. Within hours of the Ardennes offensive beginning, Lee's organization had redirected every available truck in the European theater toward Belgium. The Red Ball Express, originally established to supply Patton's advance across France, reversed direction. Truck drivers began running 20-hour shifts on icy roads, headlights blazing in defiance of air attack, hauling ammunition, plasma, rations, fuel. But the transformation went deeper than trucks. On December 23, the weather cleared. Von Leutwitz watched in growing confusion as the sky filled with C-47 transport aircraft flying so low he could see the door gunners dropping supply bundles by parachute directly into Bastogne's perimeter. Ammunition, medical supplies, tank destroyer rounds, morphine, Christmas dinner. The airlift delivered 241 tons in a single day, more than 6 times what German logistics officers believed possible. Von Leutwitz's intelligence staff insisted the numbers were exaggerated. Propaganda meant to sustain morale. They calculated fuel consumption rates for American aircraft and concluded the operation could not be sustained for more than 48 hours. They were working from Luftwaffe experience, where a besieged garrison at Stalingrad had received perhaps 70 tons per day during the doomed relief effort of 1943, and even that had drained Germany's transport capacity to breaking. The concept of a sustained airlift of this magnitude, coordinated through hundreds of flights daily, delivered with precision timing to a town under active artillery bombardment, suggested a logistics infrastructure that rendered conventional siege tactics obsolete. When Patton's Third Army broke through to relieve Bastogne on December 26, his tanks were fueled by gasoline that had been in Normandy 48 hours earlier. His troops carried ammunition manufactured in Pennsylvania the previous week. The wounded were evacuated in ambulances that had rolled off Detroit assembly lines 9 days prior and been shipped across the Atlantic, driven across France, and pressed into service without pause. But Bastogne was merely prologue. The true revelation came in January 1945, when German commanders watched in disbelief as American forces not only recovered from the Ardennes offensive, but counterattacked with greater strength than before the battle began. Generalfield Marshal Walter Model, commander of Army Group B, had staked Germany's final offensive on a calculated wager that the Americans, despite their industrial might, could not adapt rapidly to catastrophic disruption. German intelligence had observed American logistics during the autumn advance, the long supply lines, the fuel shortages that had stranded Patton's tanks in September, the ammunition rationing that had slowed the push toward the Rhine. Model believed, as Prussian doctrine had taught for generations, that logistics was the constraint that disciplined warfare, the reality that imposed caution on commanders and limits on ambition. He had planned Operation Wartime Rain to exploit that vulnerability, to shatter the American supply network so thoroughly that months would be required for reconstruction. By January 12, when his offensive had been stopped and reversed, Model received reports from his staff that defied comprehension. The Americans had not only restored their forward supply dumps, they had expanded them. Ammunition stockpiles at Liège exceeded pre-offensive levels. Fuel reserves had been replenished from depots that German intelligence had not known existed. Captured German documents from this period reveal an almost existential confusion. A January 15 situation report from the 5th Panzer Army noted, "Enemy has demonstrated capacity to replace material losses at rates incompatible with known industrial production cycles. Suggest previous intelligence estimates require comprehensive revision." What they were witnessing was not mere abundance, but a fundamental reorganization of military possibility. The United States had built a supply system premised on redundancy and overcapacity, concepts alien to German efficiency doctrine. When one supply route was cut, 3 others activated. When one depot was threatened, materials rerouted through alternate nodes automatically. The Red Ball Express, which German intelligence believed to be the primary American supply artery, was revealed to be merely one element in a network that included railway reconstruction battalions, aerial supply operations, and a pipeline system, the Big Inch and Little Big Inch, that delivered refined gasoline directly from American refineries to European ports without requiring a single tanker truck to cross the Atlantic. The symbolic weight of this abundance manifested in unexpected forms. German soldiers surrendering in late January reported that American frontline troops received hot meals daily, even in active combat zones. Field kitchens operated within artillery range. Coffee, real coffee, not the ersatz chicory blend that had sustained the Wehrmacht since 1942, was distributed to riflemen in insulated containers. Cigarettes arrived in cartons, not individually rationed. One German lieutenant captured near St. Vith described watching American engineers construct a Bailey Bridge across the Ardennes River in 8 hours, replacing a stone structure that had taken French laborers 3 years to build in 1936. The bridge was temporary, they told him. It would be used for 2 weeks, then dismantled and moved elsewhere. This casual disposability, the assumption that infrastructure could be temporary, that effort could be expendable because more effort was always available, inverted the German experience of total mobilization where every resource was precious because irreplaceable. General von Leutwitz survived the war and spent his later years attempting to articulate what he had witnessed. In a 1952 interview with American military historians, he returned repeatedly to a single image: the supply bundles falling into Bastogne, parachutes bright against the winter sky, falling in such quantities that his men stopped firing at them because there were too many to interdict. "We understood industry," he said. "We understood production. What we did not understand was a nation that could afford to be wasteful. Your logistics were not efficient by our standards. They were redundant, excessive, overlapping. But that excess was the strategy itself. The strategy itself. You could lose 1,000 trucks and not alter operations. We could lose 50 and face collapse. The war was not decided by tanks or tactics. It was decided by the fact that you could afford mistakes and we could not." The Ardennes offensive cost Germany its final reserve: 120,000 casualties, 600 tanks, irreplaceable fuel stocks expended in a gamble that failed. The United States absorbed twice those losses and emerged stronger. The difference was not courage or will. The difference was a supply system that treated war not as a test of efficiency, but as a problem of abundance, a nation that had learned to make waste itself a weapon.